time.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Happy Musicians Podcast, where it's not about getting the gig, it's about enjoying the gig. I'm your host, Tanner Guss, and this week my guest is Angie Petty. Angie's a vocalist based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and although she's been an artist in some form for most of her life, she didn't actually start approaching music seriously until the end of high school. And after that, she went on to study at the Horn School of Music at Snow College. And music school is already really tough, I think, as a lot of us know. And she went through it without the technical foundation that a lot of people get in private lessons before they show up. And she worked incredibly hard to overcome all this and accepted every challenge to grow as a person and musician along the way. And she shares that journey of self-acceptance. And I think we can all get a lot out of it. We also talk about goal setting, receiving criticism, and sexism. Thanks so much for joining us, and please welcome Angie Petty. Angie Petty, welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to. It's been a minute since we saw each other because I moved out here, but I saw recently that you posted on Facebook, and I thought I'd share it with everyone because this was something that really struck me and why I wanted to reach out to you to be on here. And you said, reposting this gem from 3 years ago because this girl has come so far. This girl just wanted to sing, perform, and find her voice. She had a lot of what she thought at the time were failures, but ultimately became huge successes. She's now learned to invest her energy where it will fill her creative well and surround herself with people that can enhance that energy. She's learned to say no, but she's also learned to say yes. She's a queen, and I'm so proud of her. And I thought that was a great example of self-reflection and self-love and someone who's working on themselves and striving to be happy as a musician. And what I was hoping we could do is you could talk about where you were at, the mental state and the anxieties and the things that you were feeling that stressed you out 3 years ago and during that process, so that we can kind of understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. So about 3 years ago, I was in school studying music. And I was frustrated because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't think writing music or being like a recording artist was ever an option, just because it's never something I did. It just seems like an unreachable goal. So the state I was in was kind of like, I need to be hired by other people as a singer in shows, and I need to be in a party band, and I need to be certain things so that I can make money. And, you know, I've always had a really natural ability for singing. And I mean, I haven't always been like at a certain level. I've used to be super pitchy, and but I got to a point where I'm a great pop singer and I can do that. So I thought, okay, that's what I can do. I need to be hired in bands to sing pop music. And one of the first paying professional gigs I got was at Lagoon Amusement Park in Farmington, Utah. And that was such an awesome gig to have. It was every night in the summer. I got to belt. I got to get this performance experience. And that opportunity actually led me to wanting to pursue music as a career. So I owe a lot to Lagoon, and I had such a great time. And I got to a point where I was doing it every summer. But then I did start to get more gigs, and I started to get hired for other things, which meant that I wasn't as available. So I remember being really sad the year that they couldn't hire me because I wasn't available enough. And I kind of took that more of a like, oh, well, they don't like me, I'm not good enough. And, I was getting more gigs outside of that atmosphere, but when I was losing the gigs I previously had, I just started to get really bummed out because there's a certain security you get in certain things like, a residency show or being in a party band. And it's somewhat consistent, but ultimately everything you do in music which I've learned now in looking back hindsight, nothing has certainty. Nothing is ever certain. Like nothing in life is ever certain.
Right.
So once I just got to that point of realizing, enjoy it while you have it. And yet, if you have a certain gig, it's great income. But I mean, nothing in the music industry is certain. So looking back, I just was frustrated that I didn't know what I was doing. And I went to school, as a vocalist, not super trained, but ready to learn. And I was really spreading myself thin for a while because I started studying jazz. I didn't know anything about jazz, but I just felt like, I remember my brothers telling me, you should study jazz because if you can do jazz, you can do anything else. So I was like, cool, I'm going to do jazz. So I went and studied jazz, and I tried to, learn improvisation, and it was so hard, but I just wanted to stick to it. So I did jazz, and then I studied classical voice technique, which was great, but then I was also trying to do pop gigs, and then I was, learning theory, and I felt like I was so interested in so many different styles that I was trying to learn it all, and then I get frustrated because I'm like, well, I can't be good at all of these things. I should just focus on one thing. And I'm now where I'm at, I'm so glad I didn't just stick with one thing like a lot of other of my peers did. They would just kind of pigeonhole themselves in one thing. And because I had this fluidity of stretching myself, trying to do so many things, I have so many hats I can put on and different things that I can do, that it has made my career a little bit easier because I can get hired to do a jazz gig. I can get hired to go sing rock songs and pop songs in a party gig. I get hired to come sing my own original music, and I've gotten gigs where I've played piano accompanying myself and singing, and I wouldn't have been able to do all of that if I wouldn't have said yes to opportunities and just learned as much as I could, especially while I was at school for only 3 years studying music. There was no other option than to do it all. So this photo came up on Instagram. It'll show you look back at this photo from 3 years ago. So I saw it, and this photo was taken at Lagoon. Every year they take pictures of the singers to put online or in front of the theater or some. I can't remember. I don't know what they did to these pictures, but I saw this picture from 30 years ago, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I had bangs, my hair was short and randomly kind of weird curls, and I remember getting this picture taken with this microphone and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so jazzy, it's so cool. And at the time I was studying jazz, and I just remember being, how I explained, frustrated that I wasn't getting a certain amount of gigs, or people weren't considering me for certain things. And I also had quite an ego where I thought, I'm the best and people should be hiring me. And, I don't know why I wasn't hired for this gig. I'm the obvious option, but looking back, it's no, nobody had to hire me for anything. Nobody owed me anything. I was still such a young musician, and I kind of had an expectation that people should hire me because I'm good. But, I had a lot to learn, and I needed a lot of people to say no to me. And the reason why I say in this post that I thought these moments were failures, but now looking back, they were huge successes, because if I wouldn't have heard so many no's, I wouldn't have had to stop and look at myself and figure out, well, okay, so that's a no, but what can I do now to get myself where I want to go? Or, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at the time, so I just forced myself to learn everything so that maybe one day it would bring me closer to figuring out what I want to do. So when I saw this picture, I just thought, good for that girl, because she didn't give up when people said no, and she just kept going and learning, and she's closer to figuring out what she wants to do and what she wants to say when it comes to music.
Yeah.
That's a long-winded answer, but
No, there's a lot to
basically
unpack
what
there, but that's amazing. I definitely want to get to what you're saying at the end, where you're starting to figure out what it is that you want to do. But if we could backtrack to a few things in there. So you had talked about how you were trying to do all these different things because you were interested in so many areas, which happens to a lot of people in music school. I know it happened to me, and it does become easy because you're just kind of scratching the surface in all these areas to get discouraged about your proficiency in each one of them. And
Hmm.
that you are right in that it does lead a lot of people, it leads them towards just picking one to maybe try to master or to pursue more uh,
Hmm.
single-mindedly. And is there anything specific that you did to keep your morale up during that, or shifts in your and how you were thinking about it and framing it in a more positive way? Or was it just kind of a matter of making it through the struggle? Or were there things that you did change to that helped?
I'm sure a lot of people would hear what I'm saying and are like even see me years ago stretching myself and doing so many things. And a lot of people would say like, you absolutely shouldn't do that. You really should just find what you're good at and do that thing. But I didn't know what the thing was. So I wanted to keep going and, do what I could. So I did get discouraged when I'm like, well, I'm spending so much time doing classical music and I'm not good at it. Or like I did like my junior recital, I decided to put together a show of old jazz standards that have become show tunes because I mean that's the beginning of jazz, and I wanted to push myself into singing more, musical theater type stuff because that was something I was really uncomfortable with, but I really wanted to be able to do it or just do something like it. So I put together a concert of some jazz standards, but then also very like arranged musical theater pieces that took me out of my comfort zone.
Hmm.
So,
So you were kind of constantly
uh,
chasing that situation of being uncomfortable and having to learn new things.
yeah, and I think what kept me going is I actually thrive. Well, ultimately, I feel like if you never put yourself in a place of uncomfort, then you're never going to grow. And I just knew that I wanted to be a very well rounded person at the end of the day. And I kind of thrive off of being in uncomfortable situations. So, coming back to how to stay positive when I'm stretching myself thin, and at the end of the day, I don't know what the end goal was at the time. I just knew that like I remember deciding to work with a voice teacher at my school who teaches opera. And I thought of all the teachers, like I don't really want to learn about pop belting, even though that's what I'm good at. And I could have really expanded on that knowledge, but I knew that I'm really uncomfortable singing classical music and I know nothing about opera. So why not study with the most like well trained, she has a doctorate degree. Her name's Dr. Ellis, Ruth Ellis, and she's such a great teacher. But I decided to study with her because I wanted to learn more about singing classical music because I knew that would help me in the long run. So I asked her to pick me a piece that was like the most well-known aria that would be challenging for me. And so she picked this one, and it's so freaking hard, but I would get so discouraged when we were learning this, and I knew at the end of the day I could walk away from it and it wouldn't be a big deal because I'm not an opera singer. But I knew that by sticking with it, by the end of the semester, just knowing that I went into a jury and sang that song, which is so hard, and I'm an alto, but it's a soprano piece. I just knew going into that, singing that, and just walking away knowing that I did it. I at least tried and I performed it and I learned everything I could about it, even if maybe it didn't sound super great. But just knowing that I did that for a whole semester and I can say I did it and I put 110% into it, that's that's the feeling that I wanted to have. It's just feeling very successful in that I did it and I was so uncomfortable doing it, but I just did it.
Yeah.
So that's knowing that I would feel that feeling if I kept putting the work into it. That's what kept me going and kept me motivated to continue learning all these different things, is just knowing that I don't have to master it, but I could get better at it. And as long as I'm better at it today than I was yesterday, then that's going to be successful for me.
Yeah.
If
So
that makes sense.
that's the metric that you're judging your achievement on is more day by day slow growth, right? And your overall expectation seems fairly realistic in that you aren't expecting to become a master at all these things. It would be maybe a disservice to all of us when you are trying to learn 5 different styles and expecting yourself to be at a professional level immediately. Each one of those might take you a career to figure out.
Yeah, nothing happens overnight. So unless I were to spend years and years and years into classical music, maybe at one point I'd become a professional, but I don't want to. I just want to have the knowledge and have an appreciation for it. And I think as long as you can drop your expectation of becoming a pro at every single thing, or just really like dropping expectations of everything, then you'll just be an all-around happier person, I think. Like you shouldn't put too much of an end goal on anything, because really in music, there is no end goal. You're constantly learning, you're constantly changing, you're constantly growing. And it's just going to be a lifelong process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. How do you approach goal setting coupled with that mindset where there isn't a clear end goal? It's something you're going to be working on for your whole life, but you also want to have things to work towards. And I don't know, I think it's a pretty tricky balance to try to find the middle ground. And I'm wondering what that looks like for you these days.
Totally. I think definitely I always try to think of goals that kind of scare me. It's like you always see that quote and it'll pop up on Facebook or Instagram constantly, but it's like, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And I think there's so much truth to that, because if your goals are something that is so attainable right away, I mean, daily goals, like I'm such a list maker. I love making like a to-do list and then being able to check off every single thing.
Do you do it physical, like on a piece of paper too?
Yeah, feeling so good that I got that whole list done. But in the last couple of years, like I used to get so frustrated if I didn't complete a whole list. But I'm at a point now where I am much nicer to myself and I don't expect an outcome. So I can make a list, and if I don't finish all of those things, that's okay. So when it comes to goals, there's great daily goals to have, and I'm trying to get better at, practicing daily. I kind of got out of I had a really good habit when I was in school, but then, once you graduate, you really have to be so self-motivated and just create a daily ritual. And so that if you don't even think about it, it's like it's something you just do. Like in the morning, I always make coffee. So I need to treat like my practice like no matter what, I'm always making coffee and I'm always going to practice right after, whatever. So for me, goal setting is creating a large goal, but realizing that it can be fluid, that your life will change and your dreams will change, and you don't have to like stick to one goal, because in the process of trying to reach a certain goal, I feel as though my ideas have changed and my goals have been changed. So everything needs to stay fluid, and it needs to stay open to new opportunities that come. But I think small daily goals, like for me right now, one of my things is I really want to start learning electric bass. And I've wanted to do it for years. And finally, I just decided like there's no time but now. So I found a bass, and my goal is to eventually get to a point where I could play a gig on bass, nothing like too complicated, but I would love to play in a band and not sing. I've always wanted to be able to play an instrument. And then one goal is to be able to play bass in my own band with my brothers and play bass and sing, so that that whole part is covered. So I know in order to reach that goal, it's only for me, it's for no one else. Like, I'm not trying to, oh, I'm going to play bass so I can get in this band and I can make so much money. Like, no, that's not the goal. It's just something I wanted to do, and it would feel so good to me to be able to do that. And that feeling of knowing, like, I just played a gig on bass for the first time. So in order to do that, I know that I need to put in, daily practice, and my daily goals might be, like, right now it's just 20 minutes a day, because, I mean, picking up a stringed instrument when you haven't played one in like 10 years, especially bass, like, I have so much of an appreciation for bass players that I didn't know before, because it is so hard to get a good tone when you don't have muscles in your fingers right now. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, 20 minutes a day is like, that's the minimum. Just trying to get my, muscles built and learn the instrument and feel good on it. So that 20 minutes a day after so much time is going to lead up to me being able to, like, know the strings and know the notes that I could go play a gig. And that would be so awesome. Like, that sounds so cool to me, that one day I might be able to do that,
Yeah,
So that's my goal. So knowing that is the goal, like, that keeps me motivated every day to reach my daily goal, to eventually reach the end goal, which, I mean, the end goal is to play a gig, but, like, that end goal will turn into another goal of, like, well, I'm going to, maybe start playing an upright bass. And it's like, your goals are always going to be fluid and always changing, just because you're always changing. It's like, I read something recently that's, or it was in a podcast. This girl said, you write your life in pencil, not in pen. So you can always erase things and you can always change it. So if you're writing your life in pen, nothing's going to change. And I thought that was so cool. So yeah, it's like, write your goals in pencil,
Yeah.
because they can change.
Yeah, I like that too. I'm curious, do you do anything to keep track of your progress, like cataloging your successes, or maybe recording yourself practicing so you can look back on how you're improving or not, or do you do anything in the sense of self-reflection as you're going through this process?
When I was in school, I used to keep a practice journal. Part of it, I had a semester where I was in a jazz improv class, and that was one of the assignments that we had to turn in at the end of the semester, was log our practice. And then after that class, I still just kept doing it, and I would log exactly what I did for like 2 years. But then after 2 years, I just remember thinking, like, I've never looked back. I have all these journals filled with practices, and I've never looked at them after I wrote it. So I don't know. For me, I just felt like there wasn't much point in logging it, because I know my growth. Like, I don't need to write it down to know that I've grown. I do always record whenever I take a lesson with a voice teacher or any kind of teacher or any kind of, workshop. Like, I always record it on my phone. And I still have recordings from my earliest voice lessons, and it's painful, but I love listening back at those, because I can be like, oh my gosh, I've grown so much. I used to sing this a certain way, and now I just naturally don't do that anymore. And I found so much connection in my voice and so much more passion. And I'm a better storyteller than I was years ago. So I like to always listen back to voice lessons, because it's always a good refresher to hear certain things again from voice teachers, and then just hear myself sing those and just hear the growth. For me, it's kind of more oral. I am very much a hands-on person, and I like to write things down. But when it comes to practice, I just want to put the time in and put good time in, rather than like writing it down just to prove that I did it, you know?
Yeah. Well, no, and I think I definitely relate to that, and I love going back and hearing myself play from years ago. Like, what are you doing? And then thinking, like, well, thank God, like, I'm not doing that anymore. I think that's one of the most powerful ways to, if you're feeling frustrated with where you're at, being able to look back on where you've come from and keeping that in mind, because it reminds you how far you've come and also encourages you to keep going. And I think it's something we could
Totally.
all do more of. One thing I wanted to ask you was that in addition to doing music, you are a professional photographer, right? And you also
Hmm.
did like dance at a pretty serious level for most of your life, right?
Yes,
And
I
I'm
did.
curious that when you're creating in these other art forms, do you experience the same kind of anxieties and mental obstacles that you do when you perform in music? Or are there unique mental hurdles that you're trying to avoid in each one of them?
Yeah, I think in any kind of situation where you're performing or being vulnerable, like in the art field, I feel like there's always the ego that comes in that freaks you out and says you can't do something. Like I know for me, whenever I have a shoot, I'm always nervous right before, and half the time I'm like hoping a client will bail just because like it would give me more time to just like mentally prepare, but I can't always not clients don't always bail, which is great, you know. But I always get nervous because I just don't know how the light's gonna be or how how fast I'll be at changing my settings based on the light, or there's so much uncertainty with shooting outdoors that is scary, and you never know how your client's feeling, and sometimes I mean there's only so much I can do to make a client feel comfortable when they're uncomfortable, and it because I mean getting your photo taken is it's kind of weird and scary, like it's nerve-wracking. So I know I always get so nervous right before a shoot, and then within 10-15 minutes of shooting I felt fine, and then once I go home and edit the photos I'm like, well, I don't know what I was worried about. These are great, like I feel good doing this. I feel good about the amount of money that has been compensated for me because like I know I did good work. But there's always that like moment before that is just always scary and uncertain. And I feel like that can be with any kind of thing. When you're going on a gig, you don't know if it's going to be a party, if people are even going to listen, if you're going to be more background music, unless it's like a very specific thing that you've done it a million times.
Hmm.
But I there's always just an uncertainty. You don't know how the night's going to go, and things are always changing, and you have to stay on your toes. And there might be a malfunction in the power supply, and you're going to have to just work with it. So
What is going through your head usually before you go out on a gig? Is there something that you intentionally focus on to get yourself in the right mindset, or do you find yourself ruminating on things that could go wrong, or are you just kind of hanging out with people and it's like, oh, we got to go on? Oh, okay, let's
yeah.
go.
So I guess it kind of depends on the gig. I know I don't do jazz gigs as much, but without fail, I always get nervous before a jazz gig because I'm just kind of out of practice, I guess, or I just don't do it as much anymore. So I do get worried about like, oh, what if I count the song off wrong, or what if I count what if I look stupid? What if I count on the wrong, you know, like on 1 and 3 instead of 2 and 4 and stuff like that, or what if like they want me to scat and I don't feel comfortable, and what if they vibe me? Like there's always that going through my head with jazz in specific, but with most of any other style, and most of the styles I do is like pop and R&B and just kind of soul stuff. I'm so comfortable in that field and in that genre that I don't get nervous before. If anything, the things going through my head are just, okay, like what am I going to bring to the table? What am I going to say in between songs? Like, or I, my goal for this is to really convey emotion, and I want to maybe play with the melody a little bit. If it calls for that, or just feeling comfortable, whatever I need to do to feel comfortable and ready to put on a good show.
Yeah.
is usually what's going through my head.
Yeah. So the situations that
But then
you're,
there's a lot of gigs where it's just like I've done some party gigs where I just jump on stage I don't have to think before because I can just do it and I know it's gonna go well because I'm playing a wedding, everyone's drunk, everyone's stoked, and we're gonna play great music, you know.
hmm so the situations where you're playing music that you've maybe quote unquote mastered and that you don't have to think about it all, it's going to come out automatic and you can just perform, you're able to focus on more kind of next level thought processes, right? Enjoying it, uh, having a deeper emotional connection with it, connecting to everyone in the crowd more. Whereas in situations where you don't necessarily have that comfort or experience with the music, it's easy to default to more instant thought processes of like, I don't want to make this specific mistake. You know, you kind of get narrow minded in those situations.
Mhm.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good example of how practice in general is a way to get more comfortable and access those deeper level thought processes, right? Of getting past like
100%.
just past the notes and then down to like the meaning behind the notes.
Totally. And that's like, yeah, I play with my band when I'm 40 a lot, and it's with my brothers and my fiance and my great friends, and we've been together for a few years, and I have most of the songs memorized, but there's a few I don't. But it's always the songs that I have completely memorized that I am confident in saying that I slay every time, and there's a new emotion behind it every time. And I'm so comfortable in it that the band could play something completely different. They could like reharm it or play a different groove, and I'll be fine. And I'll follow along with that. And then when when you know a piece of music so well that you don't have to think about it, that's, I feel like, when the magic happens, and that's when I play the best, or that's when I feel like the high notes are effortless and my tone is like smooth and very clear. So I definitely think, yeah, the more practice you can put into certain things, the easier it'll be in the moment, and the more you can actually get into the music. And depending on what the gig is, like, I mean, I always hope that I'm, conveying a message or speaking to certain people, or hopefully that they'll pick up on something based on me being so in the music that they feel something.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool to hear. That's something I definitely have been striving for these days, especially getting out of school and trying to find the meaning behind the notes, and
Yeah,
find the deeper connection.
and it's a process.
Right. I think the
Like
more it
I've
grows a
only gotten
person.
comfortable with some pieces of music I've been singing, but I've been singing it for years now, and it's taken this long to, really get into it. And sometimes I wish I could get into it sooner, but that's just my personal process, and I can't feel too bad about that.
Right. Yeah, and I guess the important part for me to keep in mind is that I don't want to wait until I'm at that point to then say, "Oh, okay, now I'm playing music, now I'm enjoying it." I want to be able to love myself through the process, right?
Definitely. I think the process gets easier, the more you do it. Like the more practice you put in, the more vocabulary you gain and skills you gain, so that you can get to that level. I mean, the more you get into your music, the easier it will be to tap into that point where everything can be effortless in the moment, and you can just play and not be, I don't know, I'm sure you've felt this sometimes, but sometimes you get into playing music and your mind could be thinking about what am I going to have for dinner tonight, or what show am I going to watch tonight after this gig,
Yeah,
And
you
I have to
completely
ask myself sometimes
disconnect.
because I'm like, I'm not even in the music. Like, why am I even singing right now if I'm not even thinking about what's going on in the moment?
Mm-hmm. Or I'll
Yeah.
often fall into a trap of thinking about, okay, how good do I sound right now? How is that idea? Was that the right decision? Um,
Hmm.
and stuff like that is maybe a survival technique if you're trying to impress the people listening, or make yourself feel good about being good, whatever that means. But when I'm doing that, I realize that I'm not actually experiencing the music at the moment at all. Is that something that you ever
Yeah.
find yourself doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if I'm playing with new people, or if I'm subbing in a band, um, I always am worried about stepping on other people's toes. Like, I know I've been hired to do what I do, but it still is nerve wracking because I'm like, what if they don't think I can hang? Or what if they don't like how I sing the song? Or what if they don't like how I'm talking to the audience? And I'm speaking kind of right now, the thing that comes to mind is I've been subbing in a few different party bands. So like I'm subbing for another female vocalist, and I know the band is so used to the way that this vocalist sings, and now I've stepped in and I'm doing my own thing, and it's always nerve wracking because I always am thinking, even though I know this music and I'm delivering it great, there's still just I'm nervous that what if this band doesn't like how I'm doing it, and I bet they're so excited for their singer to come back.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you kind of just have to do what you do and not worry about what they're thinking because they hired you or they're playing with you because they know that you can deliver, and that's what they need you to do. So
Right.
I've just kind of gotten to the point where I'm just trying not to worry about what they think and just do what I do best
Mm-hmm.
and just put on the best that I can because that's the reason I'm there.
Yeah, I
And
think
it
that's a
doesn't
good way to
matter what they
approach it.
think in the moment. And if they have something they'd prefer me to do differently, then they can tell me so that next time if I'm in that situation, I'll know that they prefer me to be doing this instead of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it is always the case for me too that when I'm with people that I know really well, I'm not worried about what they think of me because I know, like your friends, you have that connection already. I think if you are connected on a personal level, it's easier to connect on a musical level. And I think it's kind of the same as when you have like a car ride with people you don't like. If you're riding home with someone you don't really know that well, and you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
awkwardly just trying to talk about anything just to keep it going, like the idea of silence
Yeah.
would be really uncomfortable. But then when you're riding somewhere with a close friend or a family member or something, you can have long stretches of silence and you don't even really notice it or think about it. It's just completely
Yeah.
comfortable. And I think that
That's a
musical silence
really good
of,
metaphor.
I just came up with it actually, and I was really happy about it.
That's good.
But that that ability to have musical silence and listen because you're comfortable, I think for me is a huge goal that I'm trying to reach.
Yeah. That's everyone's goal is they want it to feel comfortable, or the music can speak for itself and it doesn't have to be painful when you're playing with new people. That's really
Mm-hmm.
the goal. That's what you hope for if you're playing with people you've never played with before, is that it can just happen and it doesn't have to be like work, even though you are technically working, it doesn't have to feel like work. That's
Yeah, and I
what
think
you hope it is like.
I think maybe the best way to do that is one by doing what you said by keeping in mind that they hired you or invited you up to play because they know you have a certain level of talent. You don't need to prove yourself. And if you can get past that, then you just do your job and serve the music. And if you are trying to have an open mind and connect and have open ears and you really listen to the other people on stage, then I think you have all the necessary ingredients to connect and make that music without it being painful.
Yeah. And also, I just think not everyone's going to like you,
Mm-hmm.
and everything should be taken with a grain of salt. Because at the end of the day, you could have killed the gig, but, someone in the band may have thought you murdered, like, it was not good. Like, they don't want to hire you again.
Yeah.
Or, an audience might love what you're doing, and then you go play another gig and the audience hates what you're doing. It's like, you really can't take anything too personally in music.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that you feel like you do better now than you used to?
Totally. I've adapted kind of a new mindset over this last year that I've had a lot of situations where I was not the best in the room, or I was the best in the room, but I just learned to not care too much about other people's critiques. I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but at the end of the day, not everyone's going to like my voice. Not everyone's going to like my music. And that's fine, because I'd rather be playing for the people that do want to play with me, and they do like my music, and they do like what I bring to the bandstand. So the more that I've just realized, like, it's okay if you don't like me, because, like, we don't have to play together, or I don't have to hang out with you just because we have a mutual friend. So when I just kind of stopped giving a damn and not taking everything too seriously, it's really helped, because I don't want to be playing with the people that don't value what I bring musically.
You talked about how you're trying to define yourself as an artist and what you're wanting to accomplish and say musically. And I think maybe letting go of trying to please everyone might have given you a more focused idea of what it is that you're trying to do. And I'm curious what it is that you're these days like really hoping to say or accomplish as a musician.
Well, I'm still figuring it out, and I'm getting to a point where I've said yes to a lot of opportunities, but now I've started to say no. And it feels good to say no, even if you're saying no to a big paycheck sometimes, because I've just gotten to a point where I am closer to figuring out what I want to say and what I want to do. And if there's opportunities that aren't serving my best good, like my higher good and what I want to do in the long run, then I'm going to say no.
Right. That's
For me, I what was that?
well, no. I was going to say that's great that you have that the ability to do that now, and I'm assuming you probably wouldn't be in a position where you can say no if you hadn't have said yes so emphatically for so long.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate. I have an aunt who is in the music scene in Utah, and she is a soul singer. She's incredible, and she's given me some of the best advice. Oh my gosh, my cat's meowing. He's a talkative little guy. So some of the best advice I've gotten from my aunt is to say no to things that might reflect poorly on you, and don't add value to what you're doing, if that makes sense. She's the kind of person who knows what she's good at and knows the kind of music that she does want to do. And if she gets a gig offer that might be cool, but it doesn't make sense to what she's doing, she will say no. And that's something of huge value. And I think for young students, young musicians, I mean, it is important to take opportunities, and you're not going to be making money, a ton of money at the beginning, and it's okay to say yes to free gigs until you get some experience. And then once you kind of define what you want to be doing and who you are as a musician, you can start saying no if it doesn't feel right and if it doesn't, like I said, serve you. So I'm figuring out what I want to do and the kind of performer I want to be. So yeah, I do say no to some things. I'm trying to get to more of a point where I'm not, for a really long time, I relied on other people to get me gigs. Like, I was just waiting around for people to call me for corporate stuff, and or like getting in with an agency where I could be in a party band. And I've just gotten to a point where I feel like that I need to stop waiting around for things to happen. And if I want to be a musician and I want to sing my own music and do what I want to do, then I can't rely on anyone else. I need to do it myself. So this next year, I really want to take some time and get real and really look inwards and figure out what is it that Angie has to say, and what does she want to write? What does she want to perform? What kind of music does she want to do? And I want to start writing more music, and I want to produce my own album and be my own booking agent and be my own manager and just do it all myself, because who else is going to do it for me? I can't wait around for people to do it. I have to do it myself.
That's great to hear. And I think you'll crush it. You seem to have a really positive outlook on it and a hardworking mentality. So it seems like it'll work itself out for you.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable discussing it, I'm wondering if there are any obstacles you've faced as a result of sexism in the music world.
100%.
Yeah.
I feel it a lot. And especially, I feel like in the jazz scene.
I was going to ask that if you had a worse experience with jazz musicians then.
Yeah, I've had a very specific experience, and I kind of just laugh about it now because I think this person, and I'm not going to say names.
Right.
But I had an experience where I was with a fellow female jazz musician, and we were looking to put together a gig together at a jazz club in Salt Lake. And we approached the person booking the club, and we said, we want to put together our own group. And he told us, an all-girl band would probably sell better than just the two of you doing it. And we said, well, that would be great if we could put together an all-girl jazz group. However, we don't know any female drummers that we feel comfortable playing with, and that's kind of the main issue. And he just wouldn't really say anything, and he's like, well, maybe we could fly a female drummer out for you guys if you want to put on a show. It'll just sell better if it's an all-girl band. And we were just like, we have male musicians that we'd love to play with, and we're confident enough that we can put on a good show without it just being all female. Like, you can have a co-ed band, and it'll be great. Mm-hmm. So we were both just so put off, and we still are like, we still look back at that and we laugh because it's just so ridiculous. Like, why does it have to be an all-girl group? Right. Instead of just two females? Like, let's have some female empowerment. And I'm all for an all-girl group. I would love, and that's one thing I want to put together is an all-girl group, because there's some really great female musicians in Utah, and they don't get experience or performance experience, and they don't have bands. And it's like, I would love to be a part of an all-female group. But sometimes you just can't find, especially in the jazz scene, there's just not a lot of females, and especially in Utah, there's not a lot of them doing it. So and maybe that wasn't even a huge deal, but I still look back at that, and it's still kind of painful, and it just is like, why does that need to be that way in order for us to play at this club? Why does it have to be an all-girl group when that's not possible to put together at a certain caliber with the jazz scene? There's just not a lot of females don't do it, and that's a shame. I mean, it's not a genre for everyone. It's an acquired taste for a lot of people, but I just thought that was very interesting and really just put me off and kind of gave me a bad taste in my mouth towards this certain person. But
Yeah. And is it
yeah, so
having
I feel that a lot. I feel a lot of sexism, especially. I play at bars with my band, and I want to wear what I want, and I like to wear what I feel good in, and sing what I want on stage. But you can't. It's unfortunate you can't control the amount of alcohol some people can consume and their behavior and what they will say to you. And I played this bar, and I was drinking a little bit, and I wasn't intoxicated, and I wasn't, I just had a drink, and that's it. And I was performing and singing, and I had a rough day. And with the voice, if you don't get great sleep, and you really shouldn't drink when you sing, but sometimes, like, there's nothing wrong with it. I like to drink and sing and have a good show.
right?
But this guy came up to me and had the audacity to say, you're a really pretty girl and you have a great voice, but you really shouldn't drink and sing. It doesn't sound good. And I looked at him, and I was about to punch him in my face. I was like, who the hell are you that you feel like you can come up and tell me that I shouldn't drink? Like, this is not your business. It just felt really a personal attack. And
Yeah.
it was hard to get rid of, because it just felt really like, why do you get to come tell me that? And especially if it was a female, it might have been different. It would have just been like bitchy at that point. But just the fact that this guy came up to me and thought he could tell me that, and that I don't know how he was expecting I would react, but I did not react well. And I just said, fuck you, dude. And I walked away. Because, I'm not going to take that. Like, why do you get to tell me that? And I can drink and I can do whatever I want. Like, you have no oversight over me. You're a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's unfortunate that happened. And I'm sure there's been a lot of other acts of sexism that are far worse than what I've dealt with. And those are just a few examples. And it is frustrating, because I would love to go out and wear whatever I want without catching a guy talking to me and, like, looking down at my boobs and then looking back at my eyes. And it's like, do you think I don't notice that? Like, are we having a conversation, or are you just kind of being a creep right now?
Mm.
So it's unfortunate, but all I can say is, the next generation of kids, like, as women, we can only, and I mean, as any parent, you can only hope that parents will raise their children, men specifically, to, respect women and not ever treat them with disrespect, or that they need to be playing with certain, especially in the music scene, like, they need to be playing with certain people in order to make a name for themselves as a woman.
Right. And by that, at the end, do you mean that, like, your gender shouldn't be the defining, like, reason behind any particular musical choice?
No, it shouldn't. It's you're a good player or you're not. It shouldn't have anything to do with, oh, well, she's a female.
Right.
Or he's a male. So, no. No, they can be a great female musician, or they could be a really bad female musician. It shouldn't have to do with that they are a female at all. It's just they're a good musician or they're a bad musician.
Yeah.
You want to play with them or you don't.
Absolutely.
Gender and race, anything should have nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, I think that's going to bring us to what I'm calling our coda question section, which is our short answer, quick round questions before we hit the coda and close out. So if you're ready,
Sweet.
What's your go-to feel-good album?
Oh man, right now I love Lizzo and her album "Cause I Love You." It's so badass, so good. I've been listening to it on repeat all day today. As far as like albums I've just been listening to for years, definitely "Back to Black" by Amy Winehouse. She's like one of the artists I just listened to, in middle school and never quite got her out of my head, and she's definitely one of my influences.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, if I'm gonna listen to a jazz album, I absolutely love, love, love "We Get Requests" by Oscar Peterson.
Yeah, I like that one
That's
too.
that's like, it's just so yummy. It just feels good listening to it. And I don't listen to a lot of instrumental albums, but that's one that I'll always come back to.
Awesome. Okay. What's the best advice about happiness you've ever received?
I don't think I've had a very specific piece of advice about happiness, but I did hear something that really kind of brought some light to me recently. And this came from Carl Allen, the drummer. He said, "You define your success and failure. And anything you do, it's only about your definition of success and failure." And I think that's so true. And that kind of gives me more happiness in this industry, is my success is so different from your success. And my failures are different from yours. And nobody gets to tell me what is successful and failure in my career except me.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's the happiest musician you know?
Oh, man. Oh, my friend Kyle, he's a pianist and composer. He plays keyboards. He's just the nicest guy, and he always has a smile on his face, and he's always excited to play music. And that, his attitude rubs off on other people. It's like impossible to not just smile when you're around him. So I definitely think he's one of the happiest musicians I know.
Awesome. Okay. What one piece of advice would you give a young musician who's just starting their career?
A young musician, I'm just going to tell them, learn everything. Soak up as much as you can from every teacher, every book. If you're in college, from every single class, even if you don't understand why you have to take that class. Like, learn classical technique, take songwriting classes, learn an instrument. Specifically, like, you should have piano knowledge. Play in every kind of ensemble you can. Learn music production, and put yourself out of your comfort zone so you can learn, and in turn you're going to gain so much vocabulary that you'll put it in your pocket, and then you can pull from it and have more vocabulary to express what you want to say. And the more you can put yourself out of your comfort zone and learn new things, the closer you'll get to figuring out what it is that you're good at and your main thing that you want to do as a musician.
Beautiful. And then leading kind of right off what you said at the end there, but what do you think your purpose as a musician is?
Oh, that's like a hard question, because I'm trying to think of like the best answer would be to change the world and to, make people feel something. And I would love to say that, but I became a musician for myself because I wanted to do it. And once I got over the fear of doing it and just started making progress, and now I can say that I am a musician and I am doing what I've worked for, that is purpose enough for me.
That's incredible. Well, thanks for sharing all this stuff. I think you had a ton of beautiful insight to share with people, and I know I got a lot out of it, and I think other people will too. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much. It was a great conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And if you want, you can take a second now to plug anything you have coming up that you'd like to share with people, anywhere that you could send them online to find more about you and hear your music, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram at @apettymusic. Follow my band. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Music, and it's under Petty Plus. And we have some new music coming out, so follow so you can keep up on our new releases.
That does it for this week's episode of the Happy Musicians Podcast. Right now we're listening to Something, a single by Petty Plus. The band Angie sings in with their brothers Nick and Chris Petty. Hope you're getting value out of these podcasts, and if you are, do me a favor, give us a rating, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, like us on Instagram or Facebook at The Happy Musicians, and you can check out show notes that I post for all these with more information and additional advice at thehappymusicians.com. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Hope to see you back here next week, and stay happy.